Herkes Welcome to the first of the Plays EU4 for absolute beginners. We're starting with the Ottomans today, who are probably the easiest country to play. There's a little bit of background here that effectively shows that the Ottomans are starting in a very good position. They've just successfully fought off Crusade, so if we just select them, they're down as the first of the interesting nations and recommended for beginners. We should get a bit of background that I found interesting to read, but I'm not going to go through it here. In effect, it just says that the Ottomans were attacked, they were successful in fighting everyone off, and basically gives you a full carte blanche to take over the world. And that's pretty much what we're going to be doing. A little bit of background on how they're going to work with Sunni Islam. I am effectively going to head towards legalism here. I see the Ottomans as, you know, they're basically going for champion of the faith. They're going to be universally respected, and I think that's the way to go to achieve that. At the same time, because it's a very varied empire, I'm planning to play the Ottomans as reasonably tolerant, like willing to let people pursue their own beliefs, much as they would rather that they all turn to Sunni faith. They're not necessarily going to enforce that on everyone, as long as everyone plays nice, accepts Ottoman rule, and is part of the empire. More game mechanics. Most of these nations are monarchies. This is fairly standard. It's not going to have a major effect on us. And Holy Roman Empire, not something we need to worry about much, but they're off to our northwest, as I will show you, and the main problem with them is that they can easily all band together against you, so you have to be quite careful attacking them, but nothing much to worry about. Okay, so we start the game paused, as you can see up here. And unfortunately, there's quite a bit to do. This is our environment. We own all the green areas, and we've got a few icons up here of things we need to deal with before we even press that play button. So, let's have a look. Too few rivals. Wonderful. Yeah, so this is a concept they have in the game. If I click on this icon, it'll take me straight to the relevant page. This little list of tabs also comes up if you press a giant shield with your country's flag on. But a lot of the time we're going to be accessing it through these icons. These are here to alert you to things that you need to do, and they're well worth being aware of as a relatively new player. So what have we got here? They're basically saying that we need to select some rivals. The idea of rivals is, in order to be a respected nation, you have to declare to the world that, hey, these are the people I don't like, or these are the people I'm competing with. So it recommends we select 3. Realistically, it makes sense to select people who are already our enemies. However, if we know we're going to attack someone, it might make more sense to select them, simply because when we attack them, people will look at us and say, hey, amazing, they're killing their rival, I suppose. So, who hates us? Hungary hates us, England hates us, Austria hates us, and the Mamluks hate us. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Right, well, I'm definitely going to want to attack the Mamluks at some point. They're going to be my major way of expanding down here. To the northwest, most of the other countries mentioned on there. Oh, Hungary? Yeah, Hungary might make sense. So we are going to want to expand to them, although it's likely to be slow going in Europe. Might be worth seeing who else we've got, but I think the Mamluks will definitely end up being our enemies. Well, we have a lot of enemies to choose from. Possibly a good choice, given that we've got them, is Venice, because they're absolutely tiny, but they own a few lands dotted around our burgeoning empire. So I think we should pick Venice. And who else hates us? Oh my goodness, everybody. Right, so Austria's a possibility. Austria, although with no obvious way of knowing this, is the current emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, which is a group of states which mostly these days make up Germany. They all tend to stick together, but Austria in theory is their leader, so having them as the rival does kind of stick it to the Europeans. But at the same time, we're not likely to be attacking them anytime soon. And seeing as we've already picked Venice, I'd almost rather have someone on this side of the map, but that doesn't appear to be a choice. So I think on the whole, let's go for Hungary. That's this nation here, and we at least share a border with them, so we've got a chance of attacking them. Okay, brilliant. So that's our first icon, which has disappeared. Second icon, this is telling me we don't have enough advisors. So this takes us to the first of the tabs. It tells us who our ruler is. We don't currently have an heir. This is generally not a problem in a Muslim nation, so it's not something to worry about. One thing we do want to think about is these little numbers here. These are really important. They're actually related to the numbers up here. These are generally called monarch points. There's one for administration, one for diplomacy, and one for military power. These are really important. They're like the whole game revolves around these. You want as many of these as possible. There's a lot of things you can do with them. The most basic thing is you can increase your technology in every level. So the points the Sultan has, Sultan Mehmed II, is basically his contribution to these every month. They tend to range from 0 to 6 in each category, so you can see that Sultan Mehmed II is an extremely good ruler. He's a brilliant person to start off with. He's only 12 years old, so we'll hopefully have him for a good long time, and he is really going to help us build our monarch points up. Down here, it actually tells us how many we're going to gain every month, which is a lot, but we're going to increase that by getting some advisors, one in each category. So these advisors cost a certain amount of money to hire, a certain amount of money every month, and they provide +1, +2, usually along with a little nice bonus. So in this case, because we're just starting out and we don't have a huge amount of money, I'm going to just pick a +1 advisor. The difference monthly is pretty huge, and I'm just realising we have a guy here who is unusually cheap. So normally a +2 advisor will cost us 4 ducats a month, ducats being the general currency. This guy only costs 2. Might be worth going for him. So he is our administration advisor. Administration is arguably the most important of these three. Arguably the least important is diplomacy. Interesting. I might actually go for improving relations. So these two are effectively the same. Slight difference in price, slight difference in how long they like to be around with the age, but they're going to cost 1 ducat a month each. One helps us spy on people, the other helps us improve relations. Honestly, both are quite useful, but I think I will go for improving relations. The third one will be military. Military is very important when you're fighting, and we're going to do an awful lot of fighting. We only got 1 +1, we're quite lucky. Discipline +5 does help with fighting in general. I'm not going to go into massive details about how, but at this stage we generally want better morale or better discipline. So quite lucky to get this guy. So we've got these two. What I normally do after making some decisions that cost money is I go to this third tab, the economy tab. This is quite important. Basically this number here. This is whether you're gaining or losing money every month. You want to be gaining money if at all possible. You can easily, in this game, fall into a massive debt trap, and it can be horrible. It makes the game no fun to play at all. So gaining money is great. Okay, this icon here is telling us that we have truces with a number of countries and when they're going to expire. absolutely fine. Generally not something you need to worry about, but if you are planning to attack someone, it's worth checking before you lay all the groundwork that they're not on this list, because attacking someone when you have a truce is going to make people think you're mud, so we avoid that if possible. This tells us that we can build some buildings. Probably not something to do right now, but it basically tells us we've got enough ducats, enough money in our treasury to build some buildings. This icon allows us to make national decisions. You usually want to make these, or possibly put them aside, which is this little bit, to tell you that you don't care about them. So we got adopt the title of Khalifa. That sounds like a definite yes. And the improvement is a yearly prestige, but it moves us towards legalism. I've already decided I'm going to go towards legalism, except perhaps when there's a good reason not to, if the bonus for not doing is high. It also increases our prestige every year. That's kept track of here. Goes from 0 to 100, I think. The higher it is, the better. We especially, because of the way we're playing, because we're going to be a respected Muslim nation, we're going to be the epitome of the Sunni faith, we want our prestige to be high, and right now it's at 8, so we definitely want this decision. The announcement of sect practices, again this is to do with legalism, but it also makes people less likely to rebel. Reduction to national unrest. Note that the good markers are in green, the bad effects are in red. You can actually see this with prestige. It tells you that our prestige is currently actually giving us some bonuses, which is nice. Interesting. Okay, so we will denounce sect practices. Enforce religious unity. I would say yes, let's do that. And expand the devshirme system. Oh, this is interesting. This is a historical thing. The Ottomans had, let's see, the Janissaries. That's right, they were the children of the Christian nations they'd conquered, and they were basically pressed into service. I think they were raised as Muslims, not entirely sure, but they were actually given quite a high position in society, considering they were the, children of conquered nations. So I think that would be a good thing to do, although it does take up some military power, which is bad. We're starting off in a good position, and it does increase our manpower, which is the pool of soldiers available to us. It's kept track of up here, which is extremely good. So let's do that. Let's go with the devshirme system, which I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of. These other decisions we cannot actually take at the moment. We also don't have any policies. They will come later with national ideas. So we now will have one last icon to look at, and this is about converting provinces. So because we've conquered awesome nations recently, we have an awful lot of areas in our realm. These are called provinces, the individual sections that our country is divided up into, and we have the option to spend some money every month, worth making sure we can afford it first, in order to convert them to Sunni Islam. Doing that will make our country a bit more unified, so it's generally a good thing as long as you can afford it. It can sometimes cause unrest in the province that you're dealing with, and it's worth checking this marker here, which tells you how long it will take for this to happen. It also tells you the benefit to religious unity, which is good. The more of that you can get, the better. Currently we're on 75. So this is going to take 92 months, but it's probably still worth doing because it doesn't cost too much every month, and it will be done eventually. They're currently Shia Muslims, so oddly enough on this occasion we're converting Muslims to be a different sort of Muslim in the province of Sivas, which is over here. Again, apologies for my terrible pronunciation. And you see immediately we've got a new tab warning us of provincial unrest. It doesn't look particularly riskier yet though. You generally want to keep an eye on this. If it gets to 90 you will actually get 80 or 90, you'll get another icon warning you about it. Now there's one other thing two other things that we do need to do. One of them is estates. Okay, apparently this is going to be upgraded in the next patch, so I'll probably have to remake this video. But at the moment, this page of estates basically, as far as I'm concerned, is just a source of free monarch points. These are very important, so we can't really pass up the chance to get them, even though it adds an unnecessary complexity. So you just come here every 20 years, you should get a little notification telling you when, and we do two things for each of his estates. So the merchant guilds, we demand diplomatic support. That has given us some monarch power, but it's also made them disloyal. You want to keep this above 40 if possible. So we then follow it up by giving them monopoly charters. Okay, exactly the same thing for the ulema. The ulema are the clergy, in effect. They're the local imams, I believe. So we're going to demand administrative support from them, but then we're going to seek their support. And the umera, who I'm probably mispronouncing again, are the military. So in this case we demand military support, but we call a diet, which effectively, these are effectively the local powerful people. They'd be the nobles in the West, something similar here, and we're basically calling a meeting where we listen to what they have to say. It makes them more loyal and increases their influence. All three of those things do, but just doing it once every 20 years so we can get this monarch power generally isn't going to cause us a problem. You don't want their influence to get too high. And we do have one last thing we need to worry about, which is diplomacy. Okay, there's an awful lot of stuff here. The main thing is this section here tells us here that we've got a reason to attack someone, a casus belli, reason for war. We're probably not going to make much use of this unless it's a permanent one. You can get these through spies, very useful. You can get them by completing missions, and we're also guaranteeing the independence of Ragusa. Now this is interesting. I don't think there's much to be gained from doing this at the moment, but looking up here, we have an option of up to 4 diplomatic relations before we start taking any penalties. One of them is that we're guaranteeing Ragusa. So I think the first thing we should do diplomatically is stop doing that. Ragusa is a very small nation. Admittedly they're important, they have a trade node next to them, which I will go into much later, but for now I don't think it's worth allying with them, I don't think it's worth guaranteeing them, I think we should make our own alliances. So, this is a diplomacy screen again, but specifically for Ragusa. To see ours, you can right click on our own nation. This is also where we just selected the rivals. But to make diplomatic overtures to anyone else, you right click on their nation, any of their land. So all we need to do here is revoke their guarantee. They probably won't like it, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so you can see we've lost the Ragusa. We now have 4 available diplomatic slots. So this is where we need to select our enemies and our allies. In a sense, we've already selected our enemies with the rivals. So one thing that's often worth doing is to take a look at one of your rivals, say the Mamluks, work out who their rivals are. These are potential allies. Obviously we're not going to ally ourselves. But Karakoyunlu and the Timurids, well, the Timurids are over here. Karakoyunlu are here. They're quite a big nation. They hate the Mamluks. They're probably a good person for us to ally. So let's go with that. We will offer them an alliance. We can generally only offer one alliance in one particular time frame, so we're not going to be able to do another until we actually start the game. However, there's one last thing we do need to look at up here, and it doesn't have a little tab for it, and that's the mission tree. This is interesting. This gives you an idea as to which way the game expects you to go. It generally follows history, Some of these are the same for everyone, but as a rule, certainly when starting out, there's nothing stopping you from making your own missions, but you'll have a much easier game if you try to follow these. So one of the bigger ones at the start is City of the World's Desire, and it basically says, we want to conquer Constantinople. It's what will later become Istanbul, which most people will recognise as being the capital of Turkey. So historically you can see that they definitely succeeded. The Ottomans are the forerunners of the current nation of Turkey, somewhat bigger. So that's something we definitely want to do. Now, I'm going to be cheating slightly here because I have played this before. We don't currently have a reason to attack them. So what I want to do is go into the diplomacy screen, and I actually want to start a spy network building. The spy will give us an excuse, if you like, to attack Byzantium. So we're going to set a spy going off there. Byzantium was the old empire, and a lot of his lands used to be theirs, so they're never going to like us much anyway. There's not a huge amount left of them. They have a couple of provinces. They're over here in Greece. They actually kind of own Athens. Athens is a separate nation, but they're a vassal of Byzantium, so they will fight with the Byzantines. There are two ways you can expand in EU4. Two main ways. You can expand through war, you can expand through diplomacy. Now, war, we're already gearing up to with Constantinople. Diplomacy is an interesting one. You generally want to look at nations that can become your vassal. So if I look at this nation here, Kandar, here's the nation. Two province nation. Generally a nation that will become your vassal is going to be smaller than you, as a rule. Now what I want to look at is this bit here off of vassalization. At the moment it's got a big red cross, and it tells me that they're not going to accept, even if I was able to ask them, which at present I'm not. If you hover over the big red cross, it gives you the reasons. And this is very important. The negatives are overwhelming here. They're overwhelming because the Ottomans own Kandari core provinces, which gives them a -1000. Realistically, unless for some reason they get the provinces they think of as theirs back from us, they're never going to be our vassal. It's just never going to happen. So they need to be taken militarily. It's just not worth trying to vassalize them. On the other hand, if you look at Adana over here, which is the nation of Ramazan, well, again, we've got a big red X. But if you look at the reasons, not quite as insurmountable. So I would consider these guys a possible choice of vassalization. So we're going to do that. Again, with Abdulkadir. Less likely than the Adani, but I still think it might be possible to vassalize them if they don't end up hating us. Whereas these guys, Karaman, not a chance. We own their core provinces. Hostile attitude towards Ottomans we could overcome, but core provinces, not a chance. Okay, now, just before we start, slightly obscure bit in the missions tree. We are very close to being able to build to our force limit. Force limit is the maximum army you can field without having any issues, and you can check it on the military tab, which is along here. Just here. This is your army, this is your navy, the rest of it doesn't really matter much, except maybe the leaders. Oh, and this bit. This bit's worth doing. Mothball all forts. You don't always have to do this, but it will save you some money if you do. The drawback is, if anyone attacks you without you getting ready, your now mothballed forts will not be any protection. And you may find that they'll get a fort for free if they're mothballed. But on the other hand, it does save you a lot of money in the meantime. Okay, so we only need 8 more people to get to our force limit and 1 more ship. We should try not to go over that if we can. It will cost a lot of money if we do, especially the military. So, if we were to fulfill this mission, we would then open this new one, Expand Ottomans. And you can't actually see this very well, but I believe this will actually give us a casus belli on Kandar. So what I'm actually going to do, slightly unfair, is I'm actually going to start moving my armies into position while building to my force limit. Okay, so to select the army, you can either just click on the little green tag. These two are armies. This is a navy. You can also highlight multiple armies at once if you want to move them together, or even just one army by doing that if you have trouble clicking accurately. So we can see what the army is made up of. It's got 10,000 infantry, 4 cavalry. This is something I'm not going to explain, but to start with, your best option is to always have 4 cavalry and the rest is infantry. We don't currently have any artillery, we don't have the technology. You also always want your armies to have a leader. So we've set Hadim Sehabadin as our current leader, and this army looks fine. It's got 4 cavalry, it's brilliant. So I want to move it into place in Kanik. I'm going to set them going. Here we have our second army. We only have 2. This only has 3 cavalry. You should always have 4. Except maybe later in the game when cavalry are less important. So we're definitely going to have to make 1 cavalry. We also don't have any available leaders. It says he's already assigned, so we're going to make another one. Recruit a general, give ruler military command are our only options at the moment. You should generally avoid doing this unless you've definitely got an heir who can take over, which at the moment we don't, so we're going to recruit a general. It's going to cost us some military power, but it needs doing. We need a general. There we go. You can get a rough idea of how good the generals are by the number of little stars that appear on the army when they're in charge. Our new general isn't very good. They tend to go from 1 star to 3. But even a 1-star general is way better than having no general at all, which would be no stars. So we also need to build up our army. Check again, force limit. We have room for 8 more troops, and we should build 8 troops. Now, if you remember, we need 1 cavalry. We want to stick to this top 2 here. Sorry, this is a production interface. There are a few things you can build, but here we're going with land units. So mercenaries are completely different, very expensive, but they've come in handy if you run out of manpower, which is up here. But for now, we've got plenty, we don't need them, so let's avoid them. So we're going to make 1 cavalry, which I'm going to put here, where the army is going to end up. And then I want to add 4 troops to each army. So if I build 4 troops here, and 3 more troops here, so that's a total of 8 troops. I'm putting each of them in a different province because they will only be built 1 at a time. The nobles have to get them together from a local peasantry, whatever they would have in the Ottomans at the time, the common folk, and it will take time to build them, but it will also take time for our armies to get into place. So the plan is we will complete the force limit. That will then give us a reason to attack Kandar, so we should be able to take them, and in the meantime we will have a spy working in Byzantium to give us a reason to attack them next. Just a word about general strategy. The Ottomans are kind of at a crossroads of 3 very different people groups. To the northwest we have the Europeans, who are generally at this stage Roman Catholics. To the northeast we have effectively the Muscovites, the Russians, the Hordes. We have a number of people who are generally Orthodox Christians. To the south, both southwest and southeast, we generally have Muslims. Now these three groups, sad to say, don't care that much what happens to the other two. What they do care about is their neighbours. If we conquer too much, if we go ploughing merrily into Serbia, Wallachia, Bosnia, Hungary, the rest of the nations here are going to think, oh no, he's going to attack me next, and they will form together in what the game calls a coalition. This is extremely bad and will lead to us being utterly slaughtered. So what we're effectively going to do is a kind of round-robin attack method. We're always going to want to be expanding our empire, but we're going to, on this occasion, I think, attack Kandar, which I usually think of as belonging to this group, but may actually affect this group as well, because they're kind of in the middle. But we're going to attack them first, and then we're going to attack Byzantium, which is firmly in this group. And then we'll take it from there. Realistically, I suspect our next target will be Karaman, which is definitely in the Muslim group. Yep, definitely Muslim. In fact, they're actually Sunnis. Ah, see, Kandar's also in the Muslim group. Interesting. Okay, well, hopefully we'll get away with it. But that's the plan. So, Kandar first. Apologies for the zooming. Byzantium next, and then maybe our next move should be Trebizond. At the same time, we're going to attempt to vassalize Adana, or at least lay the groundwork for vassalizing them, so we'll hopefully get their land in the long run without having to fight them. And we're also going to want a an East European ally. In general, I try to have 2 small allies who I'm trying to vassalize and 2 large allies who can help me if I get attacked. So we'll see how that goes. However, it's been around half an hour, so even though we haven't started the game yet, which kind of underlines how complicated this game is, we're basically ready to hit that clock. So I'm going to stop things there, and I'll see you next week.